What if the history you know is just the tip of the iceberg, and the hidden truths buried beneath could completely reshape the way you see the Bible? What if one day I told you that the Bible we read today might only be telling part of the story, that there are missing pieces about the act of creation, the lives of the patriarchs, and even mysterious laws of God himself that have been left out? In the shadows of religious history lies a book few have heard of but whose weight is undeniable: the Book of Jubilees. This text, excluded from most modern Bibles but preserved in the Ethiopian Orthodox canon, claims to be the missing link, filling in the gaps, revealing untold stories, and offering a deep perspective on God's divine plan for humanity. Yet, astonishingly, this book was banned in most of the Christian world. Why would such an ancient scripture be treated this way? Imagine a manuscript with 50 chapters, each one a door to an unexplored dimension of Genesis. Jubilees, also called Little Genesis, doesn't just recount creation. It reframes it through a cosmic lens, where time, angels, and hidden commandments form the very axis of human history. The book even dares to claim that humanity's shared clock, our current calendar, is fundamentally wrong, and that time itself was designed by God with sacred structure almost no one follows today. According to Jubilees, from the very first moment God brought the universe into existence, he didn't just create life. He programmed the way time should flow. This was not a wall calendar or a smartphone date app. It was sacred time, maintained by heavenly angels. The system contained 364 days, divided into 4 exact seasons of 91 days each. Every Sabbath, every sacred festival would always land precisely on the correct date. In the eyes of Jubilees, this was the one true clock approved by God, a flawless design humanity has since abandoned. But the story grows deeper. Jubilees paints an expanded creation scene. Before earth and sky took form, on the very first day, angels were made. They were not passive bystanders singing hymns. They were cosmic overseers, each assigned specific roles. Some governed the movement of the sun, moon, and stars. Others acted as messengers and guardians of divine law. The book describes how every celestial body was set on a divinely ordained path, so that no season would ever stray from its appointed place. This concept isn't unique. Other ancient writings speak of angels managing the heavens, but Jubilees emphasizes a crucial warning. When humanity breaks away from this sacred clock, chaos follows. This is the book's central theme: disconnect from God's time, and you disconnect from God himself. One of the most controversial claims in Jubilees is its insistence on a solar calendar over the lunar calendar. In its view, the solar year is the only true system because it perfectly aligns with God's divine order. Many ancient cultures, including the Israelites, eventually adopted the lunar system, a change the book condemns as a corruption. The lunar calendar, with its shifting months and festivals, leads to spiritual disorder. Jubilees warns, there will be those who study the moon, but they will confuse the seasons and turn the sacred day into a profane one. Strikingly, the solar calendar described in Jubilees is almost identical to the Ethiopian calendar, still used by the Ethiopian Orthodox Church today. 12 months of 30 days each, plus a short month of 5 or 6 days to match the cycle. Could this be one of the last living echoes of the sacred time the book describes? And yet, the biggest question remains: why was such a richly detailed, cosmically structured vision of time rejected by the early church? Was it because it threatened liturgical control? Or because it revealed a dangerous cosmic blueprint that challenged the religious order of the day? Perhaps buried in these suppressed pages lies a truth capable of reshaping how we see time, history, and our relationship with God. If someone told you that choosing to follow the lunar calendar instead of the solar one was not just a simple mistake in timekeeping, but an act of going against the will of God, how would you react? In the view of the Book of Jubilees, this is no small matter. This ancient text claims that only by returning to the solar calendar, the very time structure established by God at the dawn of creation, can humanity truly synchronize with the heartbeat of the universe. The book does not contradict the 6-day creation account in Genesis, but it dives deeper into the details, especially concerning the very first Sabbath. In Jubilees, the 7th day is not merely a moment of rest. It is an eternal institution, blessed and given by God to both mankind and the angels. The Sabbath is not simply the end of a week. It is a foundation of time itself, a sacred principle embedded into creation from the very moment the cosmos began to operate. Furthermore, Jubilees links the Sabbath to the Jubilee year cycle, 49 years, when everything, from the land and people to the heavenly hosts, enters a season of rest, release, and renewal. It is a moment when the universe is reset, reminding all that every aspect of creation belongs to God and must return to its original order. Breaking this cycle is seen as severing the bond between humanity and the Creator. The book also expands the story of Adam. While he was indeed created on the sixth day, Jubilees adds that from the very first moment, Adam was given laws and instructions, not through vague visions, but through angels of the presence. They taught him to keep the Sabbath, maintain purity, uphold the marriage covenant, and worship in the proper way. These were not just guidelines for Adam and his descendants, but reflections of divine laws that had existed long before humankind. The image of angels guiding Adam through every creature, naming and classifying them, is not merely a charming scene. It is a declaration. God's laws are not human inventions, but an inseparable part of the cosmic order. Interestingly, Jubilees suggests these divine commands were given to mankind long before Moses received the Ten Commandments, and that the heavenly hosts themselves abide by the same laws. After the fall of Adam and Eve, the narrative moves to the next generation. Jubilees not only retells Cain's murder of Abel, but emphasizes it as the first great fracture in God's covenant with humanity. Cain was cast out, yet the righteous lineage was preserved through Seth, the third son of Adam. Here, Seth is portrayed as a torchbearer of divine law, ensuring that the sacred covenant was passed down to the generations, leading eventually to Noah. When it comes to the flood, Jubilees offers almost entirely new details. The focus is not only on Noah's survival, but on the covenant after the deluge, a solemn agreement reinforcing purity, righteousness, and the keeping of God's laws. Before the flood, the book paints a grim picture of corruption, particularly to the rise of the Nephilim, giant offspring of fallen angels and human women. These giants were not only powerful, but spread a violence that consumed the whole earth. In Jubilees' telling, chaos reached its peak. Every creature, humans, livestock, wild beasts, and birds, was corrupted, their very nature twisted, and they even devoured one another. This was the final breaking point, leading God to cleanse the world entirely and start anew. Through this retelling, Jubilees does more than fill the gaps of the Bible. It constructs a vivid, detail-rich, theologically charged vision of early history, one that leaves readers asking, how many secrets of beginning have we truly forgotten? The moral collapse of humanity in the ancient world was not merely the result of individual sin. It was fueled by the dangerous influence of the fallen angels. These beings passed down forbidden knowledge, truths never meant for humankind, disrupting the natural order established by God. This secret wisdom did not lead to enlightenment, but instead drove humanity deeper into corruption and shattered the balance between heaven and earth. God's response was swift and decisive. The Great Flood, a cleansing force that swept away every trace of impurity and destroyed the root of wickedness. Yet, in the midst of this divine wrath, God preserved one family, Noah and his household, because of their righteousness. After the flood, the Book of Jubilees reveals details overlooked in Genesis. God not only vowed never again to flood the earth, but also established a new covenant with Noah, complete with strict laws on purity and sacrifice. These laws, passed down to the generations, would later be given to Israel as a protective shield against the same path of destruction. Notably, Noah was instructed to keep the Sabbath and offer sacrifices as Adam once did, preserving holiness in both body and spirit. These rules were not mere rituals, but the very boundary between survival and annihilation. This moment marked the dawn of a new era, one where obedience to God's law became the foundation to avert another divine judgment. The story shifts to Abraham, a towering figure of faith. In Genesis, we know him as the man who obeyed God's call to leave his homeland for Canaan. But in Jubilees, the narrative stretches further back into his youth, when he lived in a household devoted to idols. His father, Terah, worshipped false gods of stone and metal. Refusing to conform, young Abraham openly defied this tradition, burning the idols before everyone's eyes and fleeing into the wilderness. This was not mere rebellion. It was a declaration of war against a corrupt religious system, setting the stage for his destiny as the father of the chosen people. A striking detail in Jubilees is that Abraham followed divine laws long before Moses received them. He kept the Sabbath, offered sacrifices, and observed the laws of purity. Tradition said it had been passed down from Adam by angelic instruction. This shows Abraham not only as a man of faith, but as a key link in God's eternal plan. Where divine law existed before the pages of human history were even written. The covenant of circumcision, briefly noted in Genesis as a sign between God and Abraham, is given deeper meaning in Jubilees. It is not a mere ritual, but an eternal decree inscribed on the heavenly tablets from the dawn of creation. To be circumcised was to align oneself with the cosmic order governed by God's laws, binding both angels and humans under the same divine authority. When recounting the binding of Isaac, Jubilees adds another layer. This was not simply a test of faith, but a spiritual battle. Mastema, the embodiment of Satan, proposed a trial, hoping Abraham would fail. But as Abraham raised a knife, angels intervened at God's command, proving that faith had triumphed over the schemes of evil. Finally, the story of Jacob and Esau takes on a prophetic dimension in Jubilees. Even in the womb, Jacob was chosen to inherit the righteous covenant, while Esau was destined to stray from God's path. Isaac and Rebekah were even shown a vision of Esau's rebellious nature and the future conflicts his descendants would bring upon Israel. What appears as a simple family rivalry in Genesis becomes, in Jubilees, a chapter in the great cosmic struggle between obedience and defiance against God. From the very moment the twins, Jacob and Esau, were still in their mother's womb, a mysterious prophecy was spoken. 2 nations are in your womb. From within you, 2 peoples will be separated. One shall be stronger than the other, and the elder shall serve the younger. This was more than a prediction of different temperaments. It was the opening act of a centuries-long conflict, a struggle that was both rooted in blood and woven into the fabric of cosmic history. The book of Genesis tells the story in familiar strokes. Jacob, clever and shrewd; Esau, impulsive and hot-tempered. Yet the book of Jubilees expands the narrative, claiming that Jacob had been destined from the beginning to inherit the birthright, not merely through cunning, but because he was an essential link in God's divine plan. In this view, Esau was not just an older brother who failed to secure his place. He symbolized a rebellious lineage that would one day become the perpetual enemy of God's people. When Esau departed from his homeland, taking his family and possessions to the mountains of Seir, he established a nation, Edom. The book of Jubilees emphasizes that this was more than a geographical separation. It marked the rise of a power inherently opposed to Israel. Esau's descendants would kindle conflict for generations, embodying resistance against God's order and fulfilling the prophecy that the elder shall serve the younger in a deeper, spiritual sense, submission to the eternal will of the Almighty. Jacob's defining moment came when he received the blessing from his father Isaac. Genesis describes it as a divine favor enabling Jacob to become the patriarch of Israel's 12 tribes. But the book of Jubilees pushes further. Alongside the blessing, Jacob was entrusted with the sacred laws handed down from Abraham, the commandments concerning the Sabbath, purity, and the holy calendar, foundations that would later shape the law of Moses. Angels appeared to affirm Jacob's mission, revealing that he was not merely a mortal leader, but the guardian of decrees inscribed in the heavenly tablets since before time began. The rivalry between the brothers did not die with them. According to the book of Jubilees, the conflict between Jacob's and Esau's descendants became a war of souls, a clash between righteousness and rebellion, between God's plan and human defiance. The text even links this ancient enmity to the last days, when nations descended from Esau would rise against God's people before being utterly subdued. Even the story of Jacob's 12 sons carries a new layer of meaning. In the Jubilees account, their births were not mere products of human timing, but occurred in exact accordance with the divine calendar. Each child's destiny was predetermined and recorded in the heavenly tablets, turning the formation of Israel's tribes into a cosmic inevitability. The downfall of Reuben, Jacob's firstborn, is a poignant moment in Genesis, a personal tragedy. Yet the book of Jubilees reframes it as a violation of eternal law. Reuben's sin was not just a moral lapse, but an offense against the divine order itself. This paved the way for Judah to become Israel's political leader, and for Levi to inherit the priesthood, a role fixed in the divine covenant long before their births. By transforming familiar details into a vast theological and prophetic panorama, the Book of Jubilees recasts the story of Jacob and Esau as living proof of a deeper reality. Their lives were not merely family history, but part of an unending struggle between light and darkness, stretching from the dawn of creation to the final days of the world. According to the Book of Jubilees, the story of Levi, son of Jacob, is far more than a simple priestly account in Israel's history. He is portrayed as a central figure in God's cosmic order, chosen and set apart from his brothers to serve as the bridge between heaven and earth. From the very beginning, Levi's calling was recorded not in human writings, but on the heavenly tablets, a divine record of God's eternal plan. His duties went beyond offering sacrifices. He was entrusted with the sacred role of maintaining the people's covenant with the Creator, mediating so that they could walk in holiness before the Lord. The Book of Jubilees emphasizes that Levi's priesthood was not an improvised arrangement born out of Israel's needs during Moses' time, as often suggested by Genesis and Exodus. Instead, it was part of God's blueprint from creation itself. This elevates Levi's mission beyond historical necessity, placing him within the cosmic script that transcends the events at Mount Sinai. In Genesis, Jacob's 12 sons are primarily known as patriarchs of the 12 tribes, guiding the Israelites to the Promised Land. But in Jubilees, they are depicted as guardians of the law, entrusted with preserving the commandments passed down from Abraham and Isaac. Each tribe carried a unique spiritual mission, bound to the laws engraved on the heavenly tablets, ensuring their survival through all generations. God promised Jacob that these laws would remain an eternal inheritance for his descendants, guiding them to life. The contrast between Genesis and Jubilees becomes sharper when recounting the selling of Joseph. In Genesis, it is a tragic family drama fueled by jealousy. In Jubilees, it is seen as a direct violation of the eternal order, a sin recorded on the heavenly tablets, bringing consequences upon their descendants until true repentance was found. This act became a pivotal moment in God's greater plan, setting in motion Israel's enslavement in Egypt and, ultimately, their great deliverance. Joseph's story in Jubilees is also enriched with a sense of divine mystery. He is not merely a wise dream interpreter, but a man predestined to become the savior of his people in a time of famine. His rise to power in Egypt is not attributed solely to human skill, but to the orchestration of God. On his journey from slave to vizier, Joseph is protected by God's angels, ensuring he survives every trial until his mission is complete. An intriguing detail unique to Jubilees is a direct intervention of angels, who not only safeguard Joseph, but subtly guide events so that he will be in the right place at the right time to rescue his people. This also serves as the beginning of a greater prophecy, the enslavement and eventual liberation of Israel. In his final years, Joseph is depicted as a prophet, foretelling Israel's bondage in Egypt and their future deliverance, as it had been sealed on the heavenly tablets. His death is not the end of the story, but the opening of a new chapter, one of oppression and one of redemption. According to Jubilees, this period of slavery was no accident. It had been foretold long before the Israelites entered Egypt. Its purpose was to magnify God's power through the act of deliverance. Thus, from Levi's divine appointment to Joseph's betrayal to Israel's miraculous liberation, every event is shown as a carefully woven thread in God's eternal design. The period when the Israelites lived in Egypt was far more than a sequence of historical events preserved in ancient writings. Hidden within it is a vast tapestry, a narrative interwoven with both history and a cosmic spiritual conflict. Their years of harsh slavery, followed by miraculous deliverance, were not the outcome of random circumstances, but part of a divine plan established since the dawn of time, through which God will reveal his power and glory. In the biblical account of Exodus, God's hand is seen striking Egypt with devastating plagues, breaking Pharaoh's hardened resolve and freeing his people. Yet the Book of Jubilees unveils a deeper layer. Behind the curtain of history raged an intense confrontation between unseen powers, good and evil. In this version, Mastema, often associated with Satan, does not merely observe but actively hardens Pharaoh's heart, driving him to greater cruelty toward the Israelites. Mastema's dark forces stirred up the Egyptians, fueling oppression with one singular aim, to weaken the faith of God's people and push them to the brink of despair. According to Jubilees, this was not just a political struggle between a captive nation and an imperial power, but a cosmic battle in which each plague was more than a blow against Pharaoh. It was an assault upon the false gods of Egypt themselves. Through awe-inspiring acts, God stripped away the illusion of their power, revealing their utter helplessness before the Almighty. The uniqueness of Jubilees lies in its connection between the Exodus story and the heavenly tablets, records said to exist from the creation of the world. The liberation of Israel was not determined by shifting circumstances, but fixed with absolute precision. The 14th day of the first sacred month. Every event, from years of bondage to the plagues and the moment they crossed the sea, was part of an eternal design. In this perspective, each incident in Egypt becomes part of a divine epic. Mastema and his cohorts sought to thwart God's plan at every turn, yet his power overcame them time and again. The deliverance was not merely the end of slavery. It was a universal declaration that all powers, seen and unseen, must yield to the will of the Creator. Through the lens of Jubilees, the Exodus story emerges not only as more dramatic, but also more profound. A tale not merely to be retold, but to be pondered as a testament to unwavering faith, the hidden war between light and darkness, and an eternal plan engraved into the very foundation of creation.